Hey guys, I'm Andrew the Geek Master, and in today's video we'll be covering the full story of the Blood Hunt comic by Marvel, released in 2024. Just a heads up, we'll be focusing on the main storyline only. Basically, what you need to know is that this event centers around the rise of the vampire nation, and the Avengers will do whatever it takes to prevent the downfall of humanity. To make sure you don't miss out on more full stories like this, hit the subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and let's get started. The story starts 12 minutes before the death of the sun. Dark Force users all over the world begin to feel their powers spiraling out of control until finally the entire planet is shrouded in darkness. There is only one person responsible for all of this. She claims that this has always been her plan, and after so long, her work is complete. 15 minutes after the sun has been blocked, the Avengers work to deal with all the chaos left on Earth. Scarlet Witch informs Iron Man about the darkness ahead of them, which was caused by the supervillain known as Blackout. In fact, he was robbing a bank when suddenly he exploded and a dark energy started emanating from his body. Iron Man states that similar things have happened with Darkstar, Dusk, Silhouette, and Cloak, all Dark Force users. Scarlet Witch states that they have become portals to the Dark Force dimension. It's as if the entire Dark Force dimension is trying to pass through the portals, and neither Iron Man's technology nor Wanda's powers can help close them. Elsewhere, Tigra and Hunter's Moon observe Shroud in a similar condition due to his connection with the Dark Force. Tigra confirms via her phone that this is happening all over the world. Noticing that both the sun and the moon are blocked, Hunter's Moon asserts that this is not an accident but an attack. And indeed, this is confirmed when hundreds of vampires swarm towards them. The vampire onslaught is happening all over the globe. In less than an hour since the sun was blocked, vampires have already laid waste to several cities, and many people have become vampire chow. But not all hope is lost. In Latveria, for example, 2 people were fleeing from 2 vampires until they reach a certain place. When the vampires also try to enter, they are completely wiped out, bursting into flames upon entry. Turns out this place is the home of Victor Von Doom, also known as Dr. Doom. The villain is harboring some refugees safe from the vampires, but in return, he's demanding they become his subjects. At the same time in Brooklyn, Miles Morales also confronts vampires everywhere and uses the Venom Saber to kill them. He wonders what Blade would do until he's surprised by the arrival of the vampire hunter, who claims to have a plan and that Miles can help him. Back with the Avengers, Thor, Captain Marvel, and Black Panther are exterminating several vampires while asking who's responsible for this attack. Vision asserts that Dracula is missing, although Captain America Sam Wilson doesn't think Dracula is behind it, considering he worked hard to make the nation flourish. Then, Blade contacts everyone through their communicators, claiming he has information. He asks the heroes to meet him in the Impossible City and also requests they teleport him there along with the truck he's in. When the Avengers arrive in the city, they urge Blade to hurry because they can't waste time here while a war is raging down below. Meanwhile, when Blade arrives with the truck, all the heroes are affected by some kind of invisible attack that leaves them completely stunned. And the most surprising thing is that the main villains of this saga descend from this truck. This is when we meet the Blood Coven, a mysterious and deadly faction of vampires composed of Bloodstorm 1, who is a Dracula clone created by Hydra and hides his true nature in a sort of Michelangelo's David. Megrim, who hides his face behind a blood-soaked cloth and the folds of his skirt form, faces screaming in pain. Cruel, who is wrapped in barbed wire by his own will. Damascene, who is absolutely geometric to highlight the sharpness of the body, making him an expressionless being. Unusual, who is a mix of swirling parallel lines shaped into a human silhouette. And Smoke Eater, who inhales ghosts to gain strength in combat and becomes the heavyweight of the team by unifying multiple beings. The villains claim that Blade unfortunately couldn't make it and make it clear that they are following orders from someone above them. Then Smoke Eater inhales a strange vapor and transforms into a huge monster full of limbs and eyes. This is where a big battle between the two groups begins. Wanda is attacked by Unusual, who feeds on magic, while Thor is cut by Damascene, revealing that he can cut through anything, even the God of Thunder. Bloodstorm 1 is beating up Black Panther and Captain America, allowing Vision to be pierced by a blow from Damascene. This means that Damascene can cut from Asgardian flesh to intangible synthezoid molecules. When Iron Man sees his friends in danger and prepares to attack, Cruel wraps him up with wires and barbed wire that affect Tony even with his armor. Turns out Cruel feeds on people's pain, so with armor or not, Tony ends up being severely hurt. Megrim feeds on thoughts, leaving only agony in her victim, and that's what she's doing to Captain Marvel, who is so stunned she can't even defend herself against Smoke Eater's blows. Meanwhile, Bloodstorm 1 reveals that his goal is to turn Captain America into a vampire. That way, they will take away from humanity their greatest symbol of struggle and hope they have. In short, things are not looking good for our heroes. Everyone is losing their individual battles, and not even Thor's and Scarlet Witch's powers are enough, as Unusual devours their magic. Still, Thor resists. He knows the villains can't kill him or turn him. However, at this moment, the God of Thunder is surprised by Damascene, who pierces through his head. According to the villains, Thor will be used for another purpose. With the Avengers defeated, Bloodstorm 1 approaches Captain America. Black Panther knows the importance of Captain to humanity, so he activates the emergency evacuation for all the Avengers. In fact, T'Challa sacrifices himself to buy time for his comrades to escape. The heroes are shocked by this scene. Black Panther dying impaled and saying he won't allow the vampires to take the symbol because the world needs that symbol. And so the fight ends. The Avengers lost 2 of their members, while the villains are quite satisfied with this first outing. Meanwhile, at Doctor Strange's house, Clea believes they should be out there fighting the vampires, but Strange knows that if they manage to assemble the Montesi formula, all this chaos ends immediately. However, Blade shows up, understanding that they are planning a spell that ends all vampires, but for that they'll need the Darkhold, which unfortunately was consumed by Scarlet Witch. This is where Blade explains what's going on. All the vampires have organized themselves. They call themselves the Structure, a vampire cult that was spreading across the world before Moon Knight killed their leader. They used Atlantean rituals to detonate enough Dark Force users to turn them into portals that blocked the sun. Then they caused a global uprising by attacking humans, and finally, they defeated the Avengers with a killing squad called the Blood Coven. This leaves Steven and Clea completely astounded, but also motivates Strange to continue trying to assemble the Montesi formula. After all, he's a doctor, and the world is his patient. He'll accept the guilt of killing some vampire allies if it means the survival of humanity. Nevertheless, he still has some doubts. He wants to know who the leader of the Structure is, who gathered the monsters that killed the Avengers, who unleashed the Children of the Night. However, the answer is revealed in the worst possible way. Blade states that he is the leader of the Structure, and he simply pierces Strange's heart, eliminating the one who could be the greatest threat to the vampire nation. The chapter begins in the Impossible City, which Blade considers an ancient home for monsters. Thor has become an inexhaustible source of blood for the vampires. Scarlet Witch was contained through magical runes, and the biggest revelation is that Black Panther was turned into a vampire. Still, T'Challa seems to be fighting his urges, but Blade knows that even the proud Atlantis that fought against the tides drowned. So the Lord of Vampires dispatches all his servants to Earth, where Black Panther will seek his prize, and the Blood Coven will hunt for Blade's daughter. In New York, we see a family being cornered by a pack of vampires, and all they have to defend themselves is a measly taser. It seemed like they had no chance of salvation until suddenly one of the vampires' heads is simply decapitated. The one responsible for this act is Bloodline, Blade's daughter, Brielle Brooks, who has abilities very similar to her father's, and she wastes no time using her weapons to exterminate the other vampires. But the girl is not alone. She is accompanied by Dracula himself, dressed in his strongest armor and wielding the most powerful sword of the vampire nation. According to the vampire, the world is ending, and he needs Bloodline to save it. He even scolds the girl for risking too much to save insignificant humans, reminding her that right now she is being hunted. And indeed, suddenly the two are confronted by a presence that is not revealed now, but it is certainly not pleasant. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Hunters Moon and Tigra are fighting several vampires with only one goal. They intend to reach Dr. Strange's house because they believe that the Sorcerer Supreme is humanity's best chance of ending this madness. In this, they are surprised by Miles Morales, who first startles them, and then reveals that he is also on his way to see Dr. Strange. Then the three join forces and finally reach the Sorcerer Supreme's house. Tigra knocks several times on Stephen Strange's door without any result until suddenly, to everyone's surprise, they are greeted by Dr. Strange's astral form. Tigra questions how Strange can be playing ghost with all this mess going on outside. And that's when Dr. Strange explains that he is in this astral form due to some complications with his physical body. As we saw in the first chapter, the hero was turned into a vampire by Blade himself, and Clea is doing what she can using the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak to restrain vampire Dr. Strange. Meanwhile, we see that Bloodline and Dracula were confronted by the Blood Coven, the deadly faction of vampires sent by Blade himself. Dracula remembers Bloodstorm 1 very well, who is a clone of himself. Therefore, Dracula makes sure to remind everyone that he is the Lord of Vampires. Bloodstorm 1 claims that Dracula is a false king and that they serve the true Lord of Vampires. However, at that moment, the vampires are surprised by the arrival of the Avengers. Yes, Captain Marvel, Captain America Sam Wilson, Iron Man, and Vision appear, stating that they have a lot to avenge. The vampires' reaction is quite amusing. They start mocking the heroes because they had just beaten them in the impossible city, so they think it will be easy to defeat them again. But this time, the Avengers came prepared. As Bloodstorm 1 begins to give orders to his team members, Vision quickly grabs Megrim, that villain who feeds on thoughts. It is true that Vision's synthetic brain is very close to that of a human, which means Megrim can affect the hero. But Vision is cycling his own brain patterns so rapidly that the villain cannot access his mind. With Megrim out, there's nothing stopping Captain Marvel from focusing on the battle, and she furiously attacks Bloodstorm 1. She even mocks that at this very moment, Vision has crossed the Dark Force and exposed Megrim to sunlight, resulting in the villain's death. Captain America prevents Smoke Eater from inhaling that smoke that turns him into an almost unbeatable monster, ensuring that everyone will pay for what they did to the Panther. And while Dracula fights Damascene, the sharp villain who defeated Thor, Iron Man seeks his revenge against Cruel, the villain full of barbed wire. This time, Tony uses and abuses oscillating magnetic fields generated by his armor, preventing Cruel from hitting him. With this, Tony gains an extreme advantage until Damascene decides to intervene in the fight and plans to use the same blow that killed Thor. However, at that moment, Damascene is hit by some kind of solar beam that simply shatters the villain's arm. It turns out that Vision has returned from Earth's atmosphere, and he is overloaded with solar energy, which is the vampire's weakness. Afterwards, Captain Marvel fires a powerful energy that hits the dark force around the Earth, creating a small crack momentarily that brings a bit more sunlight. She says that even with half the strength, they are still the Avengers. And that means no matter how dark the night, They will ensure the sun will always rise again. This impressive display by the heroes makes the Blood Coven retreat through some kind of portal, promising they will return. Sam even tries to prevent them from escaping, but the villains were faster. Captain Marvel tries to comfort Captain America, stating that they will reclaim the impossible city and save their friends, while Bloodline tells Iron Man that they need to get to Greenwich Village. Then we jump to the Sanctum Sanctorum, where all the heroes gather, and Doctor Strange learns that they have already lost Thor, Wanda, and T'Challa. This leads Strange to reaffirm that they need to plan and act quickly before the worst happens. Bloodline is very happy to see Miles Morales here because, out of all of them, he is the only person she knows. The girl is very happy and begins to vent to Spider-Man, saying she can't find her father. However, at that moment, Miles begins to feel something inside him, and the chapter ends with Miles turning into a vampire. In the Impossible City, now home to the Lord of all vampires, Black Panther tells Blade that the item he's looking for is buried deep within Wakanda. While Blade insists he wants this item at all costs, Scarlet Witch, who is trapped by magical runes, congratulates Blade on getting everything he wants, but notes that one of his blood coven has not returned yet. She asserts that Blade only managed to capture the Avengers because they didn't expect his betrayal. But now that the heroes know he's behind everything, they're more than prepared for anything Blade plans. Meanwhile, at the Sanctum Sanctorum, Miles Morales, who has also been turned into a vampire, begins attacking all the heroes. When Vision holds him from behind, Miles quickly uses his Venom Blast to free himself from the android. However, as soon as he hits the ground, Clea swiftly uses the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak, while Doctor Strange uses the Eye of Agamotto to restore Miles's mind to normal. Upon discovering what happened to him, Miles is shocked to realize he almost killed his friends. But the silver lining is that he's not alone because Blade did the same thing to Stephen Strange's body. Bloodline still doesn't know who's behind it all. She even asks who the new Lord of the Vampires is. That's when Dracula reveals that Blade, her father, is the mastermind behind the plot. He's the one who cast darkness over the world, broke the powerful Avengers, and now she's the only one who can stop him, leaving the girl in complete shock. In her desperation, Bloodline simply begins to run. Since Miles is practically the only hero she knows here, he decides to go after her. But Dracula also pursues her because he won't let his only hope for victory escape. Thus, Tigra and Hunter's Moon assert that the Midnight Mission will assemble an army that cannot be killed or turned into vampires, but they need one more to join their group. Meanwhile, the Avengers know they need to confront Blade and the Blood Coven. As the villains are untouched in the Impossible City, they must find a way to lure them out. So while Clea transports Tigra and Hunter's Moon to Asgard, the Avengers plan to broadcast a message of hope to the entire world, hoping it will force Blade to leave the Impossible City to shatter that hope. Indeed, Captain America Sam Wilson begins to deliver a beautiful speech. After all, it was for this reason that T'Challa saved the Captain, because he is a symbol of hope in this dark world. Captain America's speech is seen in Halifax, Impossible City, Manhattan, Mexico City, Asgard, Latveria, and Wakanda. In the speech, Sam asserts that they've fought before against worse adversaries who also tried to conquer Earth. And just as the villains failed before, it's time for the world to tell the vampires they cannot take over this world. Tony and Carol are impressed with Sam's speech, but after the broadcast, Captain America says he just delivered the same speech he and T'Challa made in the Impossible City. Perhaps T'Challa will recognize those words, and it will give him the strength to return to the hero's side. Logically, Blade is not at all pleased to see this broadcast. He quickly contacts Panther, saying that the plans have changed. He orders Black Panther to redirect the said item to New York, which will be the Avengers' tomb. Indeed, that's when we see the ancient Atlantean temple of the first blasphemy appearing in the middle of New York. After the arrival of the temple of the first blasphemy in New York, Doctor Strange's astral form and Clea visit Doctor Doom in Doomstadt, Latveria. Naturally, Doctor Doom boasts a lot, but also understands the critical situation they're in. If the heroes came to him, things must be really bad. Meanwhile, at the temple of the first blasphemy, Blade, the Blood Coven, and Black Panther walk through the place, with Blade very happy to be here again. At this moment, Black Panther asks if the man he's talking to is really Eric Brooks, Blade, to which Blade reveals that no, he is something much bigger. He starts to give hints about who he is, which only irritates Panther, who once again asks what he is. It's here that we discover the true villain of this saga, Varnae, who was essentially the first vampire in history, and he is controlling Blade's body. Back in Doomstadt, Doctor Doom informs Doctor Strange's astral form and Clea that it's obvious Varnae is behind this attack. A few years ago, Marie Laveau failed to make Blade the host for Varnae the first time, but if Blade's actions have changed so drastically in recent days, it can only mean that Varnae finally succeeded and is controlling the vampire hunter. When Doctor Strange mentions that he noticed there are no vampires in Latveria, Doctor Doom explains that he had already taken precautions in case of a vampire invasion, as well as a precaution against the Dark Force. Still, Strange asserts that they need to restore the sun to achieve victory. To bring back the sun, Strange mentions they will need many wizards and magical creatures. But Doom reveals that he has already taken care of one of the requirements by recruiting the students of Strange Academy, which surprises both Steven and Clea. And there's still a crucial detail. Doom mentions that for these plans to succeed, Strange must grant him the title of Sorcerer Supreme. Meanwhile, in Asgard, Hunters Moon and Tigra arrive outside Khonshu's cell. Here we discover that the third person they brought with them is Wrecker, who possesses an Asgardian crowbar that happens to be the best tool to open an Asgardian prison. Back at the temple of the first blasphemy, Varnae tells Black Panther that his goal is to complete a certain ritual. For that, he needed the living Darkhold and the blood of a god in his hand in his place of power. Being a vampire is not his final form. He is destined to be something much bigger. He is destined to be the end of all things. Upon completing the ritual, Varnae begins to consume all the power of the Dark Force dimension, becoming one with the darkness. He even says that he has become a vampire that consumes entire planets, entire stars. He has become the unliving Dark Force. However, at that moment, to his surprise, he sees the bright light of the moon appearing in the sky. Not just him, but everyone. From that light, the fists of Khonshu, the souls of Moon Knights throughout human history, begin to emerge. They are led by the current Moon Knight, Mark Spector, who immediately attacks every vampire they encounter. Varnae quickly understands that the light is the moon god. But the truth is, it doesn't matter because it's too late for any god. However, suddenly, Black Panther feigns a betrayal against Varnae and simply attacks him, only to be easily stopped by the villain. Still, Varnae wants to know how this is possible since his own blood was in him. Panther reveals that Wakanda had faced vampires before and that the heart-shaped herb has been curing him of the vampiric infection little by little. When Varnae asks if Panther really thought he could stop him, Panther reveals that his true plan was to remove the thorn from Thor's head to free him from the state of semi-death the god of thunder was in. And indeed, that's what happens. Thor is finally free. And as if that wasn't enough, all the other Avengers also appear ready to defeat the villain once and for all. In Latveria, Clea is completely against Doctor Doom's plan to become the next Sorcerer Supreme. The villain claims that only he has the knowledge of the ritual to reverse the darkness, but to use it, he needs to become the Sorcerer Supreme. This is the only way to save the world. Doctor Strange, still in his astral form, eventually agrees with the villain. Doom has finally surpassed him. However, Stephen wonders if Doom engineered this crisis just for this moment, just to become the Sorcerer Supreme. Meanwhile, in Central Park, New York, the Avengers are battling Blade, whose body is being controlled by Varnae and the Blood Coven, a group of deadly and superpowered vampires. During the battle, the Scarlet Witch is finally freed, and now the Avengers are at full strength. Sam Wilson and Black Panther team up to fight Bloodstorm 1, with T'Challa thanking Sam for his speech in the previous chapters, as it helped him find the strength to resist the vampire's control. Thor confronts Varnae directly, reminding him that it's been 1,000 years since they last fought. The god of thunder tries to summon Mjolnir, but since the hammer is in orbit far away, Varnae has a temporary advantage in this battle. Nonetheless, the two engage in a massive fight. Thor versus Varnae, the god of thunder versus the god of vampires. Iron Man orders Scarlet Witch to conjure the Montesi formula, which would destroy all the evil vampires they're facing, but Wanda refuses to do so because the formula is too unpredictable. If she uses it, she might end up destroying an entire population, including all the good people who were turned. Bloodstorm 1, dismembering Vision, mocks this weakness of the heroes, saying that it is because of their humanity that they will lose. Back in Latveria, Dr. Doom informs Stephen and Clea that at this very moment the Avengers are fighting Varnae and the Blood Coven, and Khonshu's fists are fighting the vampires around the world, but it still won't be enough. Doctor Strange's astral form agrees again, but before passing his powers and title of Sorcerer Supreme, he wants Dr. Doom's word and oath that once the world is saved, he will return these things to Stephen. Doom indeed gives his word, and Dr. Strange hands him a fragment of his living soul. Since Stephen's body is currently undead, the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme is passed to Victor Von Doom. To Clea's surprise, Dr. Doom now possesses all the powers of the Sorcerer Supreme. He gets a new look, blending his outfit with Stephen's robe, and when Stephen greets him as the new Sorcerer Supreme, Doom responds with something like, "No, hail Doom." Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Dracula and Bloodline, Blade's daughter, approach the Temple of the First Blasphemy where Varnae is located. Miles Morales appears, asking Bloodline if she's really going after her father. Brielle asserts that she has to do it because it's her responsibility. Her father raised her to be a cold, sharp sword, and a sword is made to cut. Back at the Temple of the First Blasphemy, we see Varnae getting the better of Thor. He has managed to defeat the King of Asgard and imprison him with the Dark Force. The villain reveals that of all the Avengers, Thor is the one he hates the most because they are eternal enemies. However, just as Varnae is about to deliver the final blow, Mjolnir finally returns to its rightful owner. The arrival of the powerful hammer restores Thor to his full power, promising to change the course of the battle. Iron Man, struggling against Damascene, asks if Captain Marvel can break through the darkness in the sky and bring some sunlight as she did in the previous chapters. But Carol responds that the Dark Force is much denser here in the temple, and even she can't break through it. Fortunately for Tony, Vision reveals that he still has a bit of stored solar energy for a critical moment and uses it to destroy Damascene. However, to the hero's delight, this is when the cavalry arrives. Moon Knight appears to help the heroes, and he is not alone. He has brought Khonshu's fists with him. In Latveria, Dr. Doom is making his preparations as Sorcerer Supreme to end this crisis. He gathers the students of Strange Academy, positioning them specifically and initiating a mega spell, weaving the many colors of magic together, resulting in an act of magic never seen before. As the Avengers and Khonshu's fists continue their fight against Varnae's forces, the heroes remain at a disadvantage. Even with Thor wielding Mjolnir, Carol using her maximum power, and even the power of Scarlet Witch, Anything that tries to hit Varnae is swallowed by the Dark Force because the villain is drawing power from the entire Dark Force dimension. As Varnae himself says, he only has one weakness: the lineage of the body he controls, the girl, Blade's daughter, and she is not here. That is, at that exact moment, Bloodline appears and drives her sword into Blade's body, claiming she came to save her father. However, even then, Varnae is not defeated. He has spent so much time in Blade's body that it is now as much his as Blade's. Bloodline may be Blade's lineage, but she is not Varnae's lineage. But then, to everyone's surprise, Miles Morales also appears here and helps Bloodline drive the sword even deeper into the villain. Since it was Varnae who turned Miles into a vampire, this means that Miles is Varnae's lineage. The joint strike by Miles and Brielle causes Varnae to start vomiting the Dark Force from within him. Moreover, Dr. Doom, who is preparing a spell to end this crisis, senses that Varnae's concentration has been broken. He realizes that his control has been disrupted, making this the perfect moment to strike. He finally casts his spell, creating breaches in the Dark Force cloud surrounding the planet. With the Dark Force leaving Blade's body, Scarlet Witch can free him from Varnae's control, finally returning Blade to normal. Due to the blow he received from Bloodline and Miles, Blade is gravely injured. Brielle apologizes for this, but Blade says she did a good job. After all, that's what he taught her. With this, we have the conclusion of this scene. Vision and Moon Knight, who were severely injured in the battle against the vampires, are okay, and the Blood Coven fled as soon as they realized Varnae's defeat. Varnae was imprisoned by Scarlet Witch, and Blade didn't die. His wounds were treated, thanks in large part to Iron Man, who used the resources of his suit. Finally, Captain Marvel contacts all the Avengers, saying she doesn't know if it was what they did or what Doctor Strange did. But fortunately, the Dark Force is leaving Earth. Yes, the heroes are very happy to see the sun rise again in this dark world. With everything resolved, Stephen Strange praises Doom for this incredible power that saved Earth from the vampiric crisis. Now, Doctor Strange's astral form waits for Doctor Doom to fulfill his promise and follow his oath to return the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme. There is a tense moment of silence as Strange reminds Doom of the oath he made. Doom recalls that he swore to return the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme when he saved the world, but that hasn't happened yet. He has only begun to save the world. Doom uses his new powers to make Stephen disappear before him, claiming that Doom never does anything halfway. He intends to show Stephen and everyone what it means to save the world. Meanwhile, Miles is very happy to see the sun, but then he remembers that he is still a vampire and could die in the sunlight. But nothing happens. It might have something to do with Doom's spell, but Dracula himself says that for some reason, the sun has lost its sting over vampires. Vampires have a new dawn ahead of them because, for the first time in history, the children of the night don't need to fear the day. This is already a new problem for the heroes to solve. But as if that weren't enough, Iron Man realizes that there is a broadcast happening all over the world. To the surprise of all the heroes, the author of the broadcast is Dr. Doom, who claims that the threat of the vampire invasion has come to an end, and that this world has been saved once again. And there is only one name to thank for such a feat: the new Sorcerer Supreme of Earth, Victor Von Doom. I hope you enjoyed this chapter that marks the end of this bloody saga. Comment on what you thought of Dr. Doom as the new Sorcerer Supreme and what you expect for Marvel's future. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and leave your like to support us. Thanks for watching, and until the next adventure.